The government says it's making progress on cracking down on the prolonged tethering of dogs, an issue that's been long in the sights of animal welfare groups. New regulations are on the table aimed at targeting owners who fail to meet the most basic needs of their dogs, particularly those left chained for extended periods with little or no care. At the centre of the push is Associate Minister of Agriculture and Animal Welfare Andrew Hoggard, who's been in active discussions with the SPCA. Back in 2023, MPI ran a public consultation on proposed rules that would limit how long a dog could be left tethered. But despite that consultation closing more than a year ago, there's been little public movement since, leaving advocates frustrated and asking when real change will happen. I mentioned this before. One high-profile case that brought the issue into sharp focus was a dog called Casper, who had been chained up for 5 years. When inspectors found him, his condition was horrific. They described the smell as a mix of pus, rotting flesh, urine, and feces. Casper was emaciated, his rear end scalded and coated in his own waste. He had never once been exercised and had spent his life on a chain. His suffering was so advanced that humane euthanasia was the only option. The SPCA says this kind of extreme neglect could be prevented, but only if animal welfare inspectors are given the legal tools to act before things get this bad. They're calling for clear, enforceable regulations that define what's acceptable and what's not when it comes to tethering dogs. So joining me now is the Minister, Andrew Hoggard. Andrew, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Leah.
Always good to talk to you, Andrew. Would you agree it's taken a little while to address this issue? MPI ran a public consultation, as I said, and the SPCA has pushed hard for years. Why the delay?
Yeah, look, I mean, the regulations that I sort of took over in terms of the draft regulations, I just didn't feel would be enforceable.
Right.
What was there? It was going to be extremely subjective. Basically, it was saying, you've got to let your dog off the leash for 1 hour a day. Now, how is anyone going to prove, you could say, but I let them off between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. How was that ever going to be proven potentially in a court of law? What we've landed on instead and gotten sort of reworked it and come up with indicators of obvious signs of, okay, this dog's been left on the chain for too long because there's the horrific end examples you just provided before, but, there'd be signs that would be visible before it got to way to that stage. And so the signs of, the dog's obviously walked a path, you can see where it's constantly been treading. There's abrasions around the neck. There's obviously the smell of urine and feces. Those sort of things are real indicators that it's been left on the chain for too long. And so being able to look for those indicators, and if a few or more of those are present, then it gives the RSPCA and MPI the ability to, hand out fines, which they can already do the prosecutions. So,
right.
Look, in that case you mentioned, that was prosecutable. They would have been able to do that. This is about sort of that early intervention of letting people know, hey, look, this is starting to occur. You're leaving your dog on chain for too long. You need to come up with some better ways. Otherwise, if you don't, there'll be a fine.
But, okay, so at the moment, because I don't know what the rules are for the inspectors, they can come on the property because someone's phoned them or they've been told.
Yeah.
And at the moment, they see a dog tethered or tied up out the back, and they can't really do anything except give advice to the owner. Is that correct?
Well, in the case where, you just mentioned before,
right, with Casper,
they could have taken, where you get to the extreme, that's when they can take, prosecution.
But you say take prosecution, Andrew. Are they allowed to take, could they take Casper that day? Are they allowed to take the dog?
Look, I wouldn't have been able to speak about that case because I'm not that super familiar with it.
But the new regulations that you're talking about now, can an inspector go on a property?
They would be They
Can
would
they
be able
take
to
the
issue
dog?
a fine.
But what's a fine
I
going to do?
don't believe so. What's that?
But what's
Well, a fine will have it. Well, the idea is to get to a fine before they get to that point, anywhere near that point. It's to say, hey, you need to change your behaviour and stop this sort of stuff before it gets to that point where they need to take a dog off. Where there's deliberate mistreatment, they've got powers under the Animal Welfare Act. They're able to exercise there.
So okay, so now they can go. So what you're saying now under this, the new rules, the proposed rules, is that I could come on as an animal welfare inspector. There's obvious signs that the dog has been tied up for a long time because, like you said, there's a groove, a well worked groove of where it walks.
Yep.
It might have chewed at its surroundings, at itself. It's emaciated, it's thin. When the dog has spent a lot of time there. So straight away, all they can do though is fine the person. That's the first step.
That's what RSPCA were asking for, was the early intervention tool of a fine. Yeah, they wanted to do that. They wanted basically this early intervention ability that because obviously taking a prosecutable case, that requires a lot of resource, a lot of effort, and that's a hard thing to do. They wanted to be able to intervene earlier before things got bad, and this was the tool that they were after. And so we've come up with some good, sensible indicators to allow them to be able to use that tool.
Do you know how much the fine would be, or you're not in that stage yet?
I probably have seen it flash past my eyes in one of the many papers, but I can't actually remember it off the top of my head at the moment. Sorry.
And then so the fine is issued. The person might go, "Oh, that's a bit stingy. I'm not going to pay that," or they might pay it. Then what happens though? Does the inspector go back again within a certain amount of time to see if things have changed?
I think that would be something you'd want to talk to the RSPCA about how they're going to use. This is providing them with a tool to manage the welfare side of it. How they will work it. They've got other similar tools in other areas, and they do use this sort of step as sort of an education piece, just as a starting process. They don't want to get to the whole taking dogs off and, except for when it's really necessary where people aren't looking after the animals. That's something that I'd be able to talk through in terms of how they will incorporate this into their sort of suite of actions that they take.
Because you get it, you understand, Andrew, you go on, you get fined and then they leave you alone forever. So what? You pay the fine of whatever it's going to be, and then the inspector never comes back and the dog, they can... Well, I would assume they would. They can keep doing the same thing that they've always done. Well,
I think that if you had more than one, if they came back again and found the same problem, that's when they can step it up a notch and go, well, hang on, so obviously it hasn't worked, so now we're going to move up to prosecution level.
Where does the money go with that when they get fined? Who gets that money? Might be a silly question. I don't know where it would go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't actually know that one off the top of my head. I assume it'll go to the SPCA to cover their costs. Right. I'm guessing at this point, yeah.
Okay, so there's other protections that I saw that were to be introduced for dogs during vulnerable periods, such as when they're pregnant, nursing, or in the first 6 months of their lives. How does that look, Andrew? What does that mean?